The US has just issued a chilling warning. Burkina Faso is too dangerous to visit. Attacks could strike anywhere: hotels, schools, even places of worship. But why now? Insurgency isn't new here. So what suddenly made the West panic? Is it really about danger, or is someone losing control? Let's find out. The US State Department recently updated its travel advisory for Burkina Faso, placing the country under a Level 4 Do Not Travel warning, the highest level of caution issued by the US government. According to the official statement, the threat of insurgency, crime, and kidnapping remains high throughout the country, especially in the Sahel and Eastern regions. The warning emphasizes that attacks could happen without warning, targeting locations such as hotels, restaurants, police stations, military posts, customs offices, mining sites, schools, and places of worship. The advisory notes that insurgent groups may use commercially available weapons or carry out kidnappings for ransom, and that the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou has limited ability to assist citizens in many parts of the country. The message urges U.S. nationals to avoid travel to Burkina Faso entirely and to reconsider any plans involving the region, citing the volatility and unpredictability of the security environment. While the warning reflects real security concerns in some areas, its tone and broad scope have raised questions, particularly among observers who note the timing and political implications of such alerts. The sudden alarm over Burkina Faso didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of loss. Not the loss of peace, the loss of influence. The US isn't reacting to some new spike in violence. It's reacting to something far more threatening to its foreign policy, a government it no longer controls. For years, Burkina Faso was caught in the perfect storm of silence and submission. Foreign troops roamed freely, extracting intelligence and enforcing policies that favored outsiders. Mining companies operated in broad daylight, draining the country's wealth with almost no resistance. In that system, insurgency was never an obstacle. It was a background problem, something to cite when foreign troops needed justification to stay, but never enough of a concern to fix. People died, villages burned, and yet there were no dramatic travel warnings then. So why are they ringing the sirens now? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Because the new leadership under Captain Ibrahim Traoré doesn't play by the old rules. Since taking power, he's made it clear: Burkina Faso is not a base. It's not a colony. It's not a launch pad for foreign agendas. It's a sovereign nation. And in the eyes of those who once treated it like a strategic outpost, that is unacceptable. It's not about danger increasing. It's about access disappearing. When Traoré closed foreign military bases, expelled French troops, and began rewriting mining contracts, he didn't just disturb diplomatic ties, he disrupted a multi-billion-dollar system of quiet exploitation. That system relied on Burkina Faso staying passive, unstable, and dependent. It relied on Western governments portraying themselves as saviors in a crisis they never truly solved. Now that narrative is collapsing, and with it, their patience. That's why the warnings are louder than ever. Not because Burkina Faso has suddenly become more violent, but because it has become more independent. And make no mistake, these warnings aren't neutral. They're political tools. The State Department knows the power of a red alert. It scares investors. It discourages aid. It isolates a nation and labels its government as reckless, even when it's simply being self-reliant. It's not about keeping tourists safe. It's about making sure the world looks away. Because if people looked closer, they'd see something the West doesn't want them to see. A country that's no longer begging, no longer broken, and no longer playing along. Now that the game has changed, the former players are flipping the board. Now, let's assume the loss of foreign protection scares them so much, then maybe the next question we should ask is, was that protection ever real to begin with? For years, the illusion of foreign protection in Burkina Faso was carefully maintained. Soldiers with foreign flags patrolled the streets. Diplomatic envoys held press conferences. Aid organizations set up offices across Ouagadougou. To the outside world, it looked like a partnership. But on the ground, Burkinabe citizens saw something else entirely. Checkpoints near gold mines, armored convoys near luxury hotels, and an eerie silence when villages fell to insurgents. What the US called support was never about defending the people. it was about defending their stake. And now that foreign boots are gone, the narrative is being twisted. Suddenly, the absence of those foreign troops is a crisis. Suddenly, the same governments that watched silently as insurgents torched entire towns are claiming their concern for public safety. But where was this urgency when civilians were being hunted in broad daylight under a system built by Western alliances? It's not Burkina Faso that changed. It's who controls it that has changed. The so-called protection offered by Western forces was never universal. It had a perimeter. It stopped at the gates of embassies, corporate compounds, and airstrips. There was no shield for the farmer in the Sahel or the schoolgirl in Dori. Insurgents moved freely beyond the radius of foreign economic interest. In some cases, they moved too freely, as if allowed to create just enough chaos to justify the permanent presence of foreign troops. This carefully curated instability served a purpose. It made the country appear too fragile to stand alone, too chaotic to govern itself, and most importantly, too risky to challenge its foreign patrons. In that framework, the presence of foreign military was less about peacekeeping and more about gatekeeping, guarding contracts, assets, and reputations. But when Traoré took power, that scaffolding collapsed. He didn't just send foreign troops home, he exposed what they were protecting. With their departure, the line between propaganda and reality became clear. The country didn't fall apart without them. The very act of reclaiming control revealed how unnecessary, even parasitic, partnerships had become. So now the West is scrambling to rewrite the script. They're using warnings to create doubt. But to the people living under this so-called protection, the doubt had already set in long ago. The U.S. advisory doesn't reveal a new danger, it reveals a new reality, that Burkina Faso is finally out of reach, and that its protection is no longer outsourced to those who saw it as a project, not a people. The next time you hear about loss of stability, ask who's feeling unstable, because on the ground, something else is happening, something that makes the old powers very uncomfortable, and that leads us to something they're definitely not reporting. What security actually looks like now when it's built by Burkinabe hands. Now that the foreign troops are gone, the question isn't whether Burkina Faso is collapsing. It's who's paying attention to what's rising in its place. Because on the ground, a quiet transformation is unfolding, one that most international headlines refuse to acknowledge. With foreign forces out of the equation, Burkina Faso has begun building something Western powers never invested in: internal security systems designed to protect the people, not the investors. The rise of the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, or VDP, is one of the most overlooked shifts in African security strategy. These aren't hired guns or foreign-trained mercenaries. They're ordinary citizens, farmers, students, traders, who've stepped forward to defend their communities. They operate with local intelligence, intimate knowledge of terrain, and a personal stake in the safety of their homes. This is not a government outsourcing of defense. This is people reclaiming it. Under Traoré, training camps have expanded. Coordination between military and civilian forces has strengthened. Surveillance networks are being developed using locally adapted strategies, not high-tech toys from abroad, but practical boots-on-the-ground intelligence rooted in trust. The focus has shifted from protecting assets to protecting lives, and the results are real, even if the West won't say it out loud. There are regions where supply routes, once controlled by armed groups, are now open again. Schools are reopening in areas that had long been declared ungovernable. Citizens speak of feeling watched, not by foreign drones, but by neighbors who now stand guard at night. The sense of helplessness is cracking. Not because someone flew in with a flag, but because people stood up with one of their own. But here's the catch. This new security structure doesn't serve the interests of those who once profited off instability. It protects families, not profits. It secures villages, not stock portfolios. That's why it's invisible in the media coverage. Because it doesn't feed the narrative of collapse, it contradicts it. What the West sees as lack of professional oversight, locals see as freedom from occupation. What they label chaotic militia, the people call defenders of the soil. There's a new kind of order forming, one that doesn't require permission from Paris or Washington to operate. So when the US says security is deteriorating, it's only half the truth. It's deteriorating for those who once relied on foreign strongholds to keep them untouchable. But for the average Burkinabe citizen, the streets feel different now. Not because the danger is gone, but because for the first time in decades, someone is fighting to make it go away. And that shift in power, from foreign hands to local ones. So who is really under threat now? Security warnings are often dressed in concern, but behind the diplomatic language, there are also warnings of another kind: economic distress signals. Because when the US lists mining sites as possible targets, they're not just talking about physical attacks. They're signaling that the old financial pipelines are in trouble. For decades, Burkina Faso wasn't just a nation. It was a resource zone. Its gold, zinc, manganese, and other valuable exports flowed steadily out of the country into the pockets of foreign multinationals. Contracts were signed in secrecy. Revenues disappeared in offshore accounts. And entire communities living atop billions in wealth saw no benefit. Only environmental destruction, displacement, and deepening poverty. Now that model is being dismantled. Under Traoré's government, foreign mining companies are no longer treated as untouchable. They're being summoned, questioned, and audited. New tax policies are being enforced. Old deals are being re-examined. In some cases, contracts are being outright rejected. For the first time in a generation, Burkina Faso isn't negotiating from its knees. It's sitting at the table, head held high. And that's what triggered the panic. Because this isn't just about one country pushing back. It's about setting a precedent. If Burkina Faso can nationalize land, question mining licenses, and demand fair profit sharing, what stops its neighbors from doing the same? What stops West Africa from becoming a region where wealth extraction no longer happens without resistance? This is why the US and its allies are nervous. They know that minerals aren't just minerals, they're geopolitical tools. Whoever controls them controls leverage. And right now, they're watching that control slip. The travel warnings, then, are not warnings to tourists. They're coded messages to investors and corporations. Messages that say, this country is no longer stable for business, not because there's chaos, but because there's accountability. And in the old system, accountability was the greatest threat of all. You'll notice they don't highlight places where average citizens live. They highlight infrastructure linked to profit, mines, customs offices. What's at risk isn't the population. It's the system that allows foreign entities to extract wealth without oversight or consequence. This isn't about losing security. It's about losing silence. Burkina Faso is no longer offering blind access to its riches. It's demanding a new deal, one where the people come first, not last. That's what scares them. Not bombs, not bullets, but a nation that finally knows its worth and has a leader willing to fight for it. And when fear turns into propaganda, you start to see it for what it is, a strategy to isolate. That leads us to the final question. Are these warnings really about protecting anyone? Or are they just another weapon used to punish a country for refusing to be obedient? By now, the pattern is hard to ignore. A country asserts independence, challenges foreign economic dominance, and within months, sometimes weeks, travel advisories start flooding in. Warnings become headlines. Headlines become stigma. And suddenly, a sovereign nation is framed as a danger zone. But the danger isn't the country. The danger is what it represents: resistance. Burkina Faso is the latest in a long list of nations that dared to say no. No to exploitation. No to unequal contracts. No to foreign bases pretending to be peacekeepers. And this is how the punishment begins. Not with war, but with words. Carefully crafted alerts, warnings dressed as concern, and a flood of press coverage designed to do one thing: isolate. These warnings aren't about protecting lives. They're about protecting influence. Because of the US, the State Department truly cared about saving lives in Burkina Faso. Its warnings would have come years earlier. They would have issued alerts when villages were wiped out under French-supported regimes. They would have raised their voices when children disappeared in the Sahel, and when armed groups controlled entire regions while foreign troops stood by. But during those years of silence, nothing came. No panic, no advisories. Why? Because the governments in charge weren't a threat to the West's strategic interests. They were collaborators, and as long as foreign profits flowed, the human cost was tolerable. Now that Captain Traoré has flipped the script, everything has changed. Suddenly, every incident is magnified, every threat is amplified, and every reform is repackaged as recklessness. This is a geopolitical tactic, not a humanitarian gesture. The goal isn't to keep people safe. It's to make Burkina Faso look unstable, uninvestable, and undesirable. It's a form of diplomatic siege, a pressure campaign by reputation. The effect? Slow down tourism, scare away potential allies, discredit the government without firing a single bullet. It's not new. It's the same playbook used against every nation that's tried to stand on its own 2 feet. From Cuba to Venezuela, from Zimbabwe to Iran, the moment a country exits the orbit of Western control, the sky darkens with warnings. But there's one thing that makes Burkina Faso different. This time, the people aren't flinching. They know what this is. They've lived through the silence, and now they see through the noise. The alarms are loud, but so is the determination to move forward. Burkina Faso isn't collapsing, it's transforming. And the real question now isn't whether the warnings are valid, it's whether the world will keep falling for them. Because the country they want you to fear is the country finally learning to stand. So they keep saying Burkina Faso is unsafe. But what they really mean is, it's no longer predictable. And that's not the same thing. You see, the world has been trained to associate African stability with silence, obedience, and easy access. When an African nation is safe, it's usually because it's safe for someone else to extract something. Resources, compliance, loyalty. Not because the people themselves are actually safe, not because the land is truly peaceful, but because no one in power is being challenged. Burkina Faso is not exploding. It's reclaiming. It's no longer the quiet corridor between foreign military bases. It's no longer the cheap gold mine in someone else's portfolio. It's no longer the place where deals are made behind closed doors while the people starve outside them. And that kind of transformation makes those who once walked through this land with impunity feel deeply unsafe, because the ground no longer shifts to please them. There's nothing inherently unstable about a nation standing up. But to those who depended on it being down, the change looks violent. To them, any African voice that grows too loud sounds like thunder. Any policy that isn't Western approved sounds like rebellion. Any border that resists foreign intrusion is seen as a threat. But let's ask a harder question. When was Burkina Faso ever safe for Burkinabe? Safe when its gold, left in crates while its schools collapsed? Safe when foreign drones flew overhead while insurgent cells flourished on the ground? Safe when it hosted military bases that never stopped the killing of its civilians? Safety wasn't their concern back then, because the threat wasn't to them. The warning now isn't for the Burkinabe people. It's for the privileged guests who are no longer invited to sit at the table and eat first. And that's the real discomfort. Not the violence, not the instability, but the loss of hierarchy. The end of assumed dominance. Burkina Faso hasn't become hostile. It simply became less welcoming to those who expected to rule without question. It still welcomes partners, investors, allies, but only those who come with respect, not entitlement. There's a quiet revolution happening here. One that doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask to be televised, and it doesn't apologize for putting its people first. What Western powers see now is not a crisis. It's a country returning to itself. People choose dignity over dependency. A government choosing truth over diplomacy. That makes for uncomfortable headlines. It makes for harsh advisories, but it does not make for collapse. Because sovereignty isn't chaos. It just looks that way when you've never seen an African nation walk out of your shadow and into its light. So, no, Burkina Faso is not unsafe. It's simply off limits to empires. So do you think Burkina Faso is really unsafe? If yes, who is it unsafe for? The people of Burkina Faso or the Western entities? Let us know in the comment section. Why can't the West say they want to ban travel to Burkina Faso because it is no longer its colony? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.